On New Year's Eve, my parents shut down my proposal, saying you don't deserve to carry the family name, and that my sister should marry first. So I cut them off and moved on, until years later a hospital confession revealed why I was only kept alive. The champagne flutes gleamed under the chandelier as midnight approached. I stood in my parents' living room, my boyfriend Nathan's hand trembling slightly in mine. We'd been together for 4 years, and he'd asked permission to propose that night during our annual New Year's celebration. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched my father, Gerald, set down his drink with deliberate slowness. "Absolutely not," my mother, Diane, said before Nathan could finish his rehearsed speech. Her voice cut through the festive atmosphere like a blade through silk. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What do you mean, not?" My father crossed his arms, his expression hardening into something I'd seen directed at business rivals but never at me. "You heard your mother. This isn't happening." Nathan's grip on my hand tightened. "Sir, I love your daughter. I have a stable career as a software architect, I've saved for a down payment on a house, and this has nothing to do with you, young man," Diane interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "It's about family tradition. Order must be maintained." My older sister, Vanessa, shifted uncomfortably on the sofa beside her husband, Keith. She'd married 3 years prior in an elaborate ceremony my parents had funded entirely. They'd given her a vintage Mercedes as a wedding gift and a substantial check to furnish her new home. "What tradition?" I asked, my voice climbing. "Vanessa already got married. What does that have to do with Nathan and me?" Gerald stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming in its intensity. "You don't deserve to carry the family name forward. Your sister married first, as was proper. She understood her place, her value to this family." The words landed like physical blows. I released Nathan's hand and stepped back, searching my parents' faces for any sign they were joking. Some elaborate prank to make the actual approval more dramatic. But their expressions remained stone cold. "My place?" I repeated slowly. "What are you talking about?" Diane smoothed her designer dress and looked at me with something close to pity. "Darling, you've always been difficult. Headstrong. You chose that ridiculous career in graphic design instead of joining your father's firm. You moved into that tiny apartment downtown instead of staying here where we could properly guide you." "I'm 28 years old," I said, my throat constricting. "I have a career I love, I pay my own bills, and I'm happy. Why would any of that disqualify me from getting married?" Vanessa finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Maybe we should talk about this privately." "No," Gerald snapped. "She needs to understand this now. You don't get to make a spectacle of yourself with some proposal when you've spent years rejecting everything this family stands for." Nathan moved beside me, his jaw clenched. "With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell, your daughter is the most talented, compassionate person I've ever met. She volunteers at the community center, she's built an incredible portfolio, and—" "Enough," Diane said sharply. "This discussion is over." "The answer is no." I stood there, surrounded by family I'd loved my entire life, and felt something fundamental crack inside my chest. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked toward midnight. In living rooms across the city, people prepared to kiss their loved ones, to welcome the new year with hope and champagne toasts. "Why?" I whispered. Gerald's expression didn't soften. "Because you don't deserve it." Those 5 words echoed in the sudden silence. Vanessa looked away. Keith studied his shoes. My parents stared at me with matching expressions of cold certainty. Nathan's voice was gentle when he spoke. "Let's go." I grabbed my coat from the hall closet with shaking hands. As we reached the front door, Diane called out, "You're making a mistake, walking away from your family like this." I turned back one final time. My family just told me I don't deserve happiness. I think the mistake was made long before tonight. The door closed behind us with a decisive click. Outside, the December air bit through my coat as fireworks began exploding overhead. Neighbors cheered from their porches, welcoming the new year with joy I couldn't access. Nathan wrapped his arm around my shoulders as I started to cry. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed against his jacket. "I had no idea they would react like that." He kissed the top of my head. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." We drove back to my apartment in silence, the city lights blurring through my tears. When we finally stumbled inside, I collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Nathan brought me water and sat beside me, his presence steady and warm. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. I thought about all the family dinners, the holidays, the Sunday brunches where Diane had made subtle comments about my choices. How Vanessa always received the better bedroom, the nicer gifts, the automatic approval for everything she attempted. How Gerald had never attended a single one of my art shows but had flown to Chicago for Vanessa's company presentations. I want to build a life where I'm valued, I said finally. Where someone doesn't have to earn the right to basic respect. Nathan nodded slowly. Then that's exactly what we'll do. The next morning, I drafted an email to my parents. Short, direct, final. I explained that I wouldn't be attending family functions anymore. That I needed distance from people who viewed me as less than. That they were welcome to contact me when they could apologize and treat me as an equal member of the family. Diane's response came within an hour: "You're being childish and dramatic. This is exactly the behavior we were talking about." I blocked their numbers that afternoon. Vanessa tried calling 3 times before sending a text: "Please don't do this. They're just set in their ways. Give them time." I wrote back: "They told me I don't deserve to carry the family name. There's no timeline that makes that acceptable." She didn't respond. Nathan proposed properly 2 weeks later, in the botanical gardens where we'd had our first date. I said yes with my whole heart, and we planned a small ceremony at City Hall with our closest friends. No family drama, no conditional approval, just 2 people choosing each other. My colleague, Amelia, stood as my witness. Nathan's best friend, Trevor, held the rings. The officiant spoke about partnership and mutual respect, and when Nathan slipped the simple gold band onto my finger, I felt lighter than I had in years. We honeymooned in Vermont, staying in a bed and breakfast that overlooked snow-covered mountains. Nathan taught me to ski, laughing when I fell repeatedly before finally making it down a bunny slope. We drank hot chocolate by the fireplace and made plans for our future. Plans that didn't include people who had to be convinced I had value. Back home, I threw myself into my work. The graphic design studio where I'd been employed for 6 years offered me a partnership. I accepted immediately, and within 18 months, our client list had doubled. I specialized in branding for small businesses, helping entrepreneurs visualize their dreams. Each successful project felt like proof that my choices had been valid all along. Nathan and I bought a modest house in a neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. We adopted a rescue dog named Jasper and planted tomatoes in the backyard. Life became full in ways I hadn't anticipated. Dinner parties with friends who celebrated our successes. Weekend trips to farmers' markets. Quiet evenings reading on the porch while Jasper dozed at our feet. 3 years passed. Then 5. Then 7. I thought about my parents sometimes, usually during holidays or when I passed stores selling those world's best mom mugs. The hurt had faded into something more manageable, like a scar that only ached in certain weather. Vanessa had sent a birth announcement when her first child arrived, and I'd mailed back a gift card with no return address. Nathan and I decided to try for children when I turned 35. It took longer than expected, required medical intervention that drained our savings and tested our patience. But eventually, my doctor confirmed what the home test had already suggested: I was pregnant. Our daughter, Ruby, arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. She had Nathan's dark hair and my stubborn chin, and from the moment they placed her in my arms, I understood a different kind of love. Fierce and unconditional and wholly unlike anything my parents had shown me. I took maternity leave from the design studio, and Nathan's company allowed him to work remotely. We stumbled through those first exhausting months together, learning Ruby's different cries and celebrating each small milestone. When she smiled at 6 weeks old, we took approximately 300 photos. The design studio thrived beyond my expectations. My partner, Harrison, suggested we expand into web design, and within a year we hired 3 developers and a content strategist. I specialized in brand identity while Harrison handled the technical aspects, and our complementary skills created something neither of us could have achieved alone. One Thursday afternoon, a woman named Gabrielle walked into our studio with a dream of opening a chain of bookstores focused on independent authors. She had financing, location scouted, and 0 visual identity. I spent 3 weeks developing concepts, presenting mood boards that captured the intersection of traditional literary culture and modern accessibility. When Gabrielle saw the final brand package, she cried. "This is exactly what lived in my head but I couldn't articulate," she said, gripping my hands. "You saw my vision and made it real." Those moments made every rejection from my parents feel insignificant. I was building something meaningful, helping people realize their dreams through visual storytelling. The validation came from work well done, from clients whose businesses flourished partly because of the foundations we'd built together. Nathan and I settled into parenthood with Ruby like sailors learning to navigate unfamiliar waters. The sleepless nights tested us, but we developed rhythms and systems. He handled the midnight feedings while I took the early morning ones. We traded off weekend duties so each of us got time to pursue individual interests. My friendship with Amelia deepened during this period. She'd been my colleague for years, but motherhood created new bonds. We met for coffee while Ruby and her son, Thomas, played at the indoor playground. She listened without judgment when I admitted how hard I found certain aspects of parenting, how some days I missed the freedom of my pre-child life. Everyone feels that way sometimes, she assured me. It doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you honest. That honesty extended to how I processed my estrangement from my parents. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Winters who specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand that cutting off contact didn't make me vindictive or cruel, it made me someone who valued her mental health enough to enforce boundaries. You're not obligated to maintain relationships that harm you, Dr. Winters said during one session. Biology creates connection, but it doesn't mandate tolerance of abuse. I worked through layers of grief in her office. Grief for the parents I'd wanted but never had. Grief for the childhood marked by conditional affection and constant comparison. Grief for the family holidays that would never include my daughter because my parents had chosen pride over love. But alongside the grief came liberation. Each session peeled away another layer of misplaced guilt. I hadn't failed my parents, they'd failed me. That realization, simple as it seemed, changed everything. I stopped wondering if I should have tried harder, been different, somehow earned the love they'd reserved for Vanessa. Ruby's second birthday arrived with a small party in our backyard. I'd invited neighborhood families, Amelia and her kids, and Nathan's parents who'd flown in from Oregon. His mother, Patricia, had become the grandmother I'd never had, warm, supportive, endlessly patient with Ruby's toddler antics. She has your determination, Patricia observed as Ruby insisted on opening presents by herself, refusing all assistance. That's what my parents hated most about me, I said before I could stop myself. Patricia set down her cake plate and looked at me directly. Then they were fools who missed out on knowing an extraordinary woman. Those simple words, spoken with such conviction, made tears spring to my eyes. This was what parental love looked like: unconditional support, celebration of strengths, presence without agenda. The studio landed a contract with a nonprofit focused on literacy programs. The pay was minimal, but the mission resonated deeply. I volunteered additional hours designing materials for their fundraising campaigns, creating visuals that told stories of transformed lives through reading access. The executive director, Marcus, became a friend. He'd grown up in poverty, found salvation in a library that stayed open late, and dedicated his adult life to ensuring other kids had similar opportunities. His passion was infectious, and I found myself on the nonprofit's board within 2 years. You have a gift for making abstract concepts tangible, Marcus told me after a particularly successful fundraising gala. These materials don't just look beautiful, they make people feel the importance of our work. I thought about how my parents had dismissed graphic design as a ridiculous career. How they'd wanted me to join Gerald's financial firm, pushing numbers and making wealthy people wealthier. Instead, I was helping organizations change lives, creating visual languages that communicated hope and possibility. Nathan's career flourished alongside mine. His firm promoted him to lead architect on a major civic center project. He came home energized by the challenges, sketching ideas at the kitchen table while Ruby colored beside him. She'd inherited his spatial reasoning, building elaborate block towers that defied toddler engineering expectations. We talked about having another child, weighing the logistics against our desires. The pregnancy with Ruby had been difficult, and my doctor warned that future pregnancies might pose similar challenges. But when I held friends' newborns, felt their tiny weight and new person smell, longing overwhelmed practical concerns. Let's try, I told Nathan one night after Ruby had finally fallen asleep following an epic bedtime battle. I want her to have a sibling, someone who'll be there long after we're gone. He kissed me softly. Then let's try. The fertility journey the second time around was harder. Months passed without success. My doctor recommended a specialist, and we entered the world of ovulation tracking, timed intimacy, and mounting medical bills. Each negative test felt like another failure, another thing my body couldn't accomplish. Dr. Winters helped me navigate the emotional turbulence. Your worth isn't determined by your reproductive capacity, she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. You're already a mother. You're already enough. But the wanting persisted, a dull ache that accompanied every baby announcement from friends and colleagues. I was happy for them while simultaneously grieving my own struggles. The duality exhausted me. Ruby turned 3, then 4. She started preschool at a Montessori program that emphasized independence and creativity. Her teachers praised her problem-solving skills and her ability to include other children in her play. Parent-teacher conferences became celebrations of her development rather than recitations of concerns. She's got a strong sense of justice, her lead teacher, Miss Caroline, observed. Yesterday she noticed another student didn't have snacks and shared hers without being asked. When I praised her, she said it wasn't fair for someone to be hungry. I recognized my younger self in that response, the child who'd noticed inequity and spoken up, who'd questioned why fairness seemed negotiable. But unlike my parents, I nurtured that trait in Ruby. Encouraged her to advocate for herself and others. Taught her that kindness was strength, not weakness. The studio celebrated its 10th anniversary with a client appreciation event. We'd grown from that initial partnership to a team of 15 employees. Young designers I'd mentored were landing their own major accounts, developing styles that pushed our collective work in exciting directions. Harrison gave a speech crediting our success to taking chances on people and projects that mattered. He looked at me when he said it, acknowledging the nonprofit work that had raised our profile while draining our profit margins. But that work had attracted clients who valued purpose alongside profit, and ultimately made us more successful than we dreamed. I was 37 when the fertility specialist suggested IVF as our best option for a second child. The procedure was expensive, invasive, and emotionally grueling. Nathan and I discussed it extensively, weighing whether we could handle another potential disappointment. "I'm in if you're in," he said finally. "But I need you to know that our family is complete with just Ruby if this doesn't work. She's enough. You're enough. We're enough." We moved forward with one round of IVF, agreeing it would be our final attempt. The 2-week wait after the embryo transfer was torture. I analyzed every twinge, every moment of nausea, looking for signs that might mean nothing. The positive pregnancy test arrived on a random Tuesday morning. I stared at the 2 lines for several minutes before waking Nathan. He cried when I showed him, pulling me into an embrace that conveyed relief and joy and exhaustion from the journey. Ruby was 5 years old, and Mason was 8 months old, when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe to accept. "Is this Mrs. Patterson?" A woman's professional voice asked. "Yes, this is she. This is St. Michael's Hospital calling. Your father, Gerald Caldwell, was admitted this morning with a severe heart attack. He's listed you as his emergency contact." The room tilted sideways. I sat down hard on the kitchen floor while Nathan looked up from where he was building blocks with Ruby. "We haven't spoken in almost 8 years," I managed. "I understand this might be unexpected," the nurse said gently. "But he's requesting to see you. His condition is critical." I ended the call and stared at my phone. Nathan came over and sat beside me, Ruby balanced on his hip. "What happened?" he asked. I explained about Gerald's heart attack, about being listed as emergency contact despite our years of silence. Nathan listened carefully, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you want to go?" Did I? Part of me wanted to delete the number and pretend the call never happened. The man who'd told me I didn't deserve happiness now needed something from me. But another part, smaller and more insistent, remembered being 7 years old and Gerald teaching me to ride a bike. Remembered him reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character. "I think I have too," I said quietly. Nathan nodded. "Then we'll go together." We arranged for Amelia to watch Ruby and drove to St. Michael's in tense silence. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria food. A nurse directed us to the cardiac intensive care unit, where machines beeped in steady rhythms. Gerald looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the hospital bed and monitors. Diane sat in a chair beside him, her makeup perfect despite the early hour. She stood when we entered, her expression cycling through surprise and something else I couldn't identify. "You came," she said. "The hospital called." I stayed near the door, Nathan's hand warm against my back. Gerald's eyes opened. His voice came out raspy and weak. "I need to talk to you. Alone." Diane's mouth tightened, but she gathered her purse and left without argument. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving us in artificial silence broken only by medical equipment. I approached the bed slowly. "What did you want to say?" Gerald struggled to sit up slightly, wincing with the effort. "I'm dying. The doctors are optimistic, but I can feel it. This is the end. I'm sorry you're going through this," I said carefully. He shook his head, the movement causing monitors to spike briefly. "Don't be polite. I don't deserve it." He paused, breathing labored. "You were right to cut us off. I was cruel that New Year's Eve. Unforgivably cruel." The apology landed strangely after so many years. I waited for him to continue. "There's something you need to know," Gerald said. "Something Diane and I decided when you were born. A decision that shaped everything that came after." Dread pooled cold in my stomach. "What decision?" He closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he'd lost consciousness. Then he spoke again, each word deliberate and heavy. "Vanessa isn't your sister. Not biologically. We adopted her when your mother and I struggled with infertility. Spent years trying to conceive, and eventually we made peace with having one child. We poured everything into Vanessa. Every hope, every expectation, every dream we'd had about family." I gripped the bed rail, my knees threatening to buckle. Then, impossibly, your mother got pregnant with you. The doctors called it a miracle. But to us, his voice cracked. To us, it felt like a complication. We'd already built our family around Vanessa. Already established her as our legacy, our future. And then you came along and disrupted that narrative. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Gerald's eyes opened, meeting mine directly. Because you deserve to know why we treated you the way we did. It wasn't fair, it wasn't right, but we convinced ourselves that Vanessa was our real daughter. The one we'd chosen. You were the unexpected addition that we resented for making our family complicated. The machines beeped steadily as I processed his words. Years of subtle preferences, of being second choice, of watching Vanessa receive automatic approval suddenly had context. The night of your proposal, Gerald continued, I was terrified. Terrified that if you got married, had children, built a successful life, it would prove we'd been wrong about you. That you'd become everything we'd reserved for Vanessa, and we'd have to confront our own cruelty. So you told me I didn't deserve happiness, I said flatly. I told you that because I was a coward who couldn't admit I'd failed you as a father. Tears tracked down his weathered face. I kept you alive because biology demanded it, but I never let you be my daughter. And that shame has eaten at me every day since you walked out that door. I stepped back from the bed, my chest tight with competing emotions. Anger at the confession, grief for the childhood I deserved but never received, and a strange sense of validation that my instincts had been correct all along. Does Vanessa know? I asked. About being adopted? Yes, we told her when she turned 18. About how we treated you because of it? No. And Mom? She's known all along. We made every decision together. The door opened, and Diane entered hesitantly. She looked between us, reading the tension accurately. You told her, she said to Gerald. She deserved the truth, he replied weakly. Diane turned to me, her composure cracking slightly. I won't ask for forgiveness. What we did was inexcusable. But your father is right. We let our own insecurities and twisted priorities poison your childhood. You were innocent, and we punished you for existing. I stood there in that sterile hospital room, looking at the two people who'd given me life but withheld love. Part of me wanted to scream at them, to detail every moment their favoritism had cut deep. But mostly, I felt tired. I have a daughter, I said quietly. Ruby is 14 months old. She has Nathan's eyes and my determination, and when I look at her, I can't imagine ever making her feel less than. The thought of treating her as an afterthought or complication makes me physically ill. Diane's face crumpled. You're a mother. I am. And being her mother has taught me that love isn't finite. That you don't run out of affection or approval just because you have more than one child. I looked at Gerald, his monitors still beeping their steady rhythm. Whatever you're asking for now, whether it's absolution or reconciliation, I can't give you. The damage is too deep. I'm not asking for anything, Gerald said. Just telling you the truth so you can move forward knowing it wasn't your fault. Nothing you did or didn't do caused our treatment. The failure was entirely ours. Nathan appeared in the doorway, giving me a questioning look. I nodded slightly, and he entered, standing beside me with quiet support. This is Nathan, I said. My husband. The man you rejected without bothering to know. Gerald had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry. Apologize to him, not me. Gerald turned his gaze to Nathan. I judged you unfairly. You were trying to build a life with someone I'd already decided didn't matter. That failure of character is mine to own. Nathan's jaw worked briefly before he spoke. I appreciate you saying that. But I need you to understand something. Your daughter is the strongest person I know. She built a life filled with love and success despite your rejection. She didn't need your approval to become remarkable. Diane made a small sound, halfway between a sob and a gasp. We should go, I said, suddenly desperate for fresh air and distance. I hope you recover, Gerald. I genuinely do. But this doesn't change anything between us. We left before either parent could respond, navigating the maze of hospital corridors back to the parking lot. The afternoon sun felt startling after the fluorescent lighting. I breathed deeply, trying to ground myself in the present. Are you okay? Nathan asked once we were in the car. I don't know, I admitted. They essentially confirmed that everything I felt growing up was real. That I wasn't imagining the favoritism or making up the distance. But having that validation doesn't make it hurt less. He started the engine but didn't pull out of the parking space immediately. What do you want to do? I thought about Ruby waiting at home, probably covered in pureed sweet potato and joy. About the design studio where tomorrow I'd meet with a new client excited about launching her bakery. About the life Nathan and I had built brick by brick, without my parents' blessing or support. I want to go home, I said. I want to hug our daughter and remember that family isn't just biology or obligation. It's the people who choose to show up, who celebrate your existence instead of resenting it. Nathan pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward our neighborhood. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Mom called. Can we talk? I stared at the message for several blocks before responding. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need time to process. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, I understand. I'm sorry for everything. Gerald survived the heart attack, though his recovery was slow. Diane called once, 2 weeks later, to update me on his progress. I listened politely and thanked her for the information but didn't visit again. Vanessa sent a longer message eventually, explaining that she'd always known she was adopted but hadn't realized how differently our parents had treated us. She claimed she'd thought the favoritism was normal sibling rivalry. The message ended with an invitation to meet for coffee. I let it sit in my inbox for a month before responding with a careful decline. Maybe someday I'd be ready to rebuild something with Vanessa. But the foundation of our relationship had been built on unequal ground, and I needed time to determine if repair was even possible. Mason's arrival transformed our family dynamic completely. Ruby took her role as big sister seriously, insisting on helping with diaper changes and singing to him when he cried. Nathan and I were older, more exhausted, but also more confident. We knew which battles mattered and which didn't, trusted our instincts instead of constantly second-guessing ourselves. The sleepless nights were brutal, but they carried different weight than they had with Ruby. I understood now that this phase would pass, that eventually Mason would sleep through the night and the fog of exhaustion would lift. That perspective made the difficult moments more bearable. My maternity leave lasted 3 months before I returned to the studio part-time. Harrison had hired an associate creative director who'd kept projects moving smoothly in my absence. Coming back felt like slipping into a favorite coat, familiar, comfortable, exactly right. I pumped milk in my office between client meetings, balancing conference calls with feeding schedules. Some days the juggling act felt impossible, but Amelia reminded me that I didn't have to be perfect. You just have to be present, she said. That's all kids really need. Ruby started kindergarten the same month Mason turned 6 months old. The school had excellent teachers and a robust arts program. She came home bursting with stories about new friends and projects. Her artwork covered our refrigerator, gradually replacing the professional photos we'd carefully curated. One evening, she asked why she didn't have grandparents like her friend Oliver. He brought his grandmother for show and tell, and Ruby had noticed the absence in her own life. Sometimes families are complicated, I explained, choosing my words carefully. My parents and I don't see each other because they weren't very kind to me when I was younger. Her little face scrunched with confusion. But grandparents are supposed to love you. They are, I agreed. And you have Grandma Patricia and Grandpa Robert who love you very much. Sometimes family is the people who show up and care about us, not just the people we're related to. She seemed to accept this, returning to her coloring book. But the conversation stayed with me for days. Ruby would grow up without knowing her maternal grandparents, without the full extended family I'd once imagined. That loss felt real even though I didn't regret the choices that led to it. The design studio continued expanding. We moved to a larger office space with room for workshops and collaborative areas. I taught occasional classes on brand development, enjoying the opportunity to share knowledge with emerging designers. Several students mentioned that my approach, emphasizing storytelling and emotional connection, differed from their formal training's focus on technical execution. Design isn't just about making things look good, I told one class. It's about communication. Every color choice, every font selection, every spatial decision tells part of a story. Your job is ensuring that story aligns with what your client needs to say. A young designer named Sophia approached me after class with a portfolio full of potential. She'd grown up in a small town where creative careers seemed impossible, but she taught herself design software and developed a distinctive style. I hired her as an intern, and within a year she was leading projects for major clients. You gave me a chance when nobody else would, she told me during her annual review. You did the work, I corrected. I just recognized what was already there. But I knew what her words really meant. Someone had seen her value when others overlooked it. Someone had invested in her potential without demanding she prove herself first. I'd offer the kind of unconditional support I'd never received from my own parents. Mason grew from infant to toddler with remarkable speed. He was quieter than Ruby had been, more observant. He'd sit for long periods watching ants cross the sidewalk or leaves flutter in the breeze. Nathan joked that we produced an engineer and a philosopher, two extremes that somehow balanced each other perfectly. Ruby's relationship with her brother evolved from protective to collaborative. They built elaborate pretend worlds together, incorporating stuffed animals and blocks into complex narratives. Listening to their play, Hearing the kindness and creativity they brought to interactions, I felt profound gratitude that they'd never know the conditional affection I'd experienced. The nonprofit work expanded when Marcus approached me about joining a collaborative project with 3 other organizations. They wanted to create a comprehensive resource hub for underserved communities, combining literacy programs, job training, and small business development. The scope was massive, requiring visual branding that could encompass multiple services while maintaining cohesive identity. I assembled a team of 5 designers, and we spent 3 months developing the brand architecture. The work was challenging and often frustrating, but seeing the completed materials displayed at the launch event made every late night worthwhile. We'd created something that would tangibly improve people's lives. Nathan's Civic Center project reached completion around the same time. The building was beautiful, all clean lines and natural light, designed to welcome rather than intimidate. At the opening ceremony, the mayor gave a speech about accessible public spaces and community pride. Nathan stood beside his team, humbled despite his central role in the success. "You're amazing," I told him that night, after we'd returned home and relieved Amelia from babysitting duty. He pulled me close, resting his chin on my head. "We make a pretty good team. Both of us building things that matter." That simple observation captured what we'd created together, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. We celebrated each other's successes without competition or jealousy. We parented as equals, dividing responsibilities based on capability and availability rather than traditional gender expectations. We built exactly the kind of relationship my parents had tried to convince me I didn't deserve. Life continued moving forward. Ruby grew into a curious toddler who asked endless questions and made us laugh daily. The design studio landed a major contract with a restaurant chain, expanding our team and reputation. Nathan got promoted to senior architect at his firm. We bought a bigger house with an actual yard and a spare room for the second child we hoped to have. I joined the local business association and mentored young designers looking to start their own studios. Our circle of friends expanded to include other parents from Ruby's preschool and neighbors who shared our values. On what would have been our 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised me with a weekend trip to the same Vermont bed and breakfast where we'd honeymooned. Ruby stayed with Amelia, who spoiled her outrageously with ice cream and park visits. We skied again, both significantly better than our first attempt. Drank hot chocolate by the same fireplace. Made love in a room overlooking mountains that remained unchanged despite everything that had shifted in our lives. "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked one night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. I considered the question seriously. I regret that my parents couldn't be who I needed. I regret that Ruby won't have grandparents on my side who show up with unconditional love. But I don't regret walking away. That choice saved me. He kissed my forehead. "You saved yourself. I just got to be part of the journey." We returned home to Ruby's squealing excitement and Jasper's ecstatic tail wagging. The house smelled like the cookies Amelia had helped Ruby bake. Our life felt full in ways my younger self couldn't have imagined during that devastating New Year's Eve. Gerald passed away 2 years after his heart attack. Diane called to inform me, her voice hollow with grief. I attended the funeral, sitting in the back row with Nathan beside me. Vanessa delivered a eulogy about a devoted father, and I listened to her describe a man I'd never really known. At the reception afterward, distant relatives asked about my life with genuine interest. I showed pictures of Ruby and our new son, Mason, who'd arrived 6 months prior. Talked about the studio's recent expansion and Nathan's work. They seemed surprised by my success, as though Gerald and Diane had painted a different picture entirely. Diane approached as I prepared to leave, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I came for closure," I replied honestly. "Not for him, because you deserve to know that what happened at Thanksgiving wasn't just about Natalie's cruelty. It was about a family culture your mother and I created, where worth was measured by all the wrong things. Lily didn't fit the image of what we thought a grandchild should be. You didn't fit the image of what we thought a daughter should be. And instead of examining our own narrow thinking, we made you both feel less than." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is the title to the house. We can't accept it back. But we're not keeping it either. We're donating it to a children's charity, specifically one that supports adoption services." It seemed fitting. I took the envelope with shaking hands. "Dad, you don't have to, we do. We absolutely do. That house represented everything wrong with our values. Letting it go is the first step in building something better." He stood, preparing to leave. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to let us back into your lives. But I needed you to know that we see our mistakes now. We see them clearly." After he left, I sat holding that envelope for a long time. James found me there an hour later, and I told him everything. He's really trying, James observed. He is. But is trying enough? That's not for me to answer, love. That's your decision. Sunday brought another surprise, a package delivered to our door. Inside was a handmade quilt, clearly crafted with care. The pattern incorporated stars and moons in deep blues and purples, colors Lily loved. Attached was a note in my mother's handwriting. I started making this the day after Thanksgiving. I wanted Lily to have something made specifically for her, with love. I understand if you don't want to accept it, but I hoped she might like it. Every stitch was sewn with an apology and a promise to do better. With all my love, Grandma Ruth. Lily came down the stairs just as I was unfolding it. Her eyes went wide. Mom, is that for me? It's from Grandma, I said carefully, watching her reaction. She ran her fingers over the fabric, tracing the constellation patterns. It's beautiful. Can I keep it? Do you want to? She nodded, already wrapping it around her shoulders like a cape. Can I write her a thank you note? Something in my chest loosened. Of course you can, baby. We sat at the kitchen table together, and Lily carefully composed her note. Dear Grandma Ruth, thank you for my quilt. I love the stars. Love, Lily. Simple, honest, with no complications. That evening, more messages arrived. Cousins reaching out to say they'd heard what happened and supported us. Friends from the adoption community sharing their own stories of family rejection and reconciliation. My former college roommate sending a long text about how proud she was of me for standing up for my daughter. But mixed in were other messages too. Relatives who thought I was overreacting. People who believed family should forgive and forget. An aunt who suggested that maybe Lily was being too sensitive, that children needed thicker skin. I deleted those without responding. Not everyone would understand, and that was fine. I didn't need universal approval. I needed to protect my daughter and maintain my boundaries. The Friday after Thanksgiving, I invited Mrs. Patterson over for coffee. She'd sent a kind message checking on Lily, and I needed to talk to someone who understood the complexities of adoption. We sat at my kitchen table while Lily played upstairs, and I told her everything that had happened. That poor baby, Mrs. Patterson said, shaking her head. After everything she's been through, to have family treat her that way. I just keep wondering if I overreacted, I admitted. If I should have handled it differently. You protected your child. That's never an overreaction. She squeezed my hand. And for what it's worth, Lily seems okay. Resilient. That's because she knows you have her back. Monday morning, James left for work early. I was getting Lily ready for school when my phone rang, an unknown number. Usually I didn't answer those, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Mrs. Monroe? An unfamiliar woman's voice. Yes? This is Catherine Wells. I'm a social worker with the adoption agency where you met Lily. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I heard about what happened at your family gathering. She paused. Lily's former foster mother, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned it. She and her husband have become friends with your family? Yes, they're our neighbors now. Wait, how did she know what happened? You told her about it when you invited them for coffee on Friday, remember? I'd forgotten. That conversation felt like weeks ago, not days. Right. Yes. I'm calling because I wanted you to know that what you did, standing up for Lily, setting those boundaries, that matters more than you might realize. Many adoptive parents struggle with family acceptance issues, and too often they capitulate to keep the peace. You showed Lily that her place in your family isn't negotiable. That's powerful. Her words settled something in me I hadn't realized was unsettled. Thank you for saying that. I also wanted to ask if you'd be willing to share your experience with some of our prospective adoptive parents. We do preparation courses, and honestly, dealing with extended family is one of the biggest challenges people face. Hearing from someone who's navigated it successfully could help. I'm not sure I'd call this successful, I said with a weak laugh. You protected your child. You maintained your family's dignity. You didn't allow anyone to diminish your daughter's worth. That's absolutely successful. Catherine's voice was warm but firm. Think about it. No pressure. But your story could help a lot of families prepare for what might come. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen thinking about her offer. Could our painful Thanksgiving actually help other families? Could something good come from Natalie's cruelty? Lily appeared in her school uniform, backpack already on. Ready, Mom. Looking at her bright face, her confidence, her joy, I realized Catherine was right. We had successfully navigated this. Not perfectly, not without pain, but we'd emerged stronger. Lily knew beyond doubt that she was wanted, valued, protected. That was worth every difficult conversation, every burned bridge, every uncomfortable boundary I'd had to set. James wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "How are you doing?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Sad. Angry. Relieved. All of it at once." "That's fair." We stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the kitchen we'd renovated together, in the house we'd chosen together, in the life we'd built piece by piece. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, but inside we were warm. "Thank you," I said finally. "For standing up for her. For us." "Always," James said simply. "That's what family does." The next morning, I woke to find Lily already up, sitting at the kitchen table with James. They were making a list, her small handwriting careful and deliberate next to his confident scrawl. "What's this?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. "We're planning next year's Thanksgiving," Lily announced proudly. "Daddy says we can invite anyone we want." I looked over her shoulder at the list. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, who had been so kind during the adoption transition. Our neighbors, the Pattersons, who'd welcomed us with cookies when we moved in. James's college roommate and his family. People who had shown us kindness, who had treated Lily with love and respect, who had earned their place in our lives. "This is perfect," I said, kissing the top of her head. My phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Thank goodness." My mother's voice was thick with tears. "I've been trying to reach you all night. Please, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "What happened yesterday was unforgivable. Your father and I spent all night talking, and we realize now how badly we failed you." "Failed Lily?" "We got so caught up in maintaining appearances, in keeping the peace with Natalie, that we forgot what actually matters." I waited, saying nothing. "We want to make this right," she continued. "We want to be better grandparents to Lily. Better parents to you. Please give us a chance to prove that we can change." "What about Natalie?" My mother sighed. "Your sister is dealing with her own issues. She and Devin had a long talk last night. She knows she was wrong. But honestly, this isn't about her. This is about us, our relationship with you and your family. We can't force Natalie to change, but we can control our own actions." She nodded, accepting this. "He died knowing he failed you." That knowledge haunted him. "Good," I said, and meant it. He should have been haunted. He should have spent every remaining day regretting how he treated an innocent child. Diane flinched but didn't argue. "You turned out remarkable despite us. Maybe because of how we pushed you away." "No," I corrected firmly. "I turned out remarkable because I refused to accept your assessment of my worth. Because I found people who saw my value without conditions attached. Despite you, not because of you." I left the reception without looking back, Nathan's hand steady in mine. We drove home to our children, to the life we'd built with intention and love. The life my parents had tried to convince me I didn't deserve. Ruby was 5 now, old enough to ask questions about family trees and grandparents. I told her age-appropriate truths about distance and difficult relationships. Emphasized that families came in all configurations, and what mattered most was mutual respect and kindness. "Do your parents not like you?" she asked once, with a child's blunt curiosity. "They didn't know how to love me the way I deserved," I explained. "So I found people who did. Like Daddy, and Amelia, and all our friends who celebrate us." She seemed satisfied with this answer, returning to her coloring book without further questions. Mason grew from infant to toddler, hitting milestones that filled our house with joy. I photographed everything, building albums full of memories and proof that love could be unconditional. That children deserved to know they were valued simply for existing. The design studio celebrated its 15th anniversary. We'd grown from a small team of 4 to a respected firm of 22 employees. I gave a speech at the celebration about taking risks and believing in yourself even when others doubt you. Several young designers approached afterward, thanking me for the inspiration. Vanessa reached out again when Ruby turned 7, asking if her children could meet their cousin. I agreed to a supervised playdate at a neutral park. Watching our kids play together while Vanessa and I made awkward small talk felt surreal. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you," she said as our daughters went down the slide together. I was a kid too, but I benefited from their favoritism without questioning it. You were a child, I acknowledged. But you're an adult now, and you stayed silent when it mattered. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How wrong everything was. We didn't become close after that meeting, but we maintained civil contact for our children's sake. Ruby enjoyed having a cousin, and I wasn't going to punish her for my parents' failures. But I kept firm boundaries, ensuring Vanessa understood that our relationship existed on my terms. Diane declined rapidly after Gerald's death, grief and age combining to diminish her. She moved to an assisted living facility, and Vanessa managed her care. I sent flowers on her birthday but didn't visit. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. On Ruby's 8th birthday, we threw a party in our backyard. 20 children ran shrieking through sprinklers while parents chatted over lemonade and cake. Nathan and I stood on the porch, watching the chaos with matching smiles. You did it, he said softly. Build exactly the family you wanted. I leaned against him, content in ways that transcended simple happiness. We did it. Together. Ruby's laughter rang out as she chased Mason through the yard, both of them soaked and delighted. Friends surrounded us, people who'd chosen to be part of our lives without reservation or condition. The house we filled with love and intention stood solid behind us. My parents had been wrong about everything that mattered. I did deserve to carry a name forward, just not theirs. I deserved happiness, partnership, success, and children who knew they were treasured. I deserved a life built on respect rather than obligation. And I claimed all of it without their permission or blessing. The sun set slowly over our celebration, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Children played until exhaustion claimed them. Adults lingered over coffee and conversation. Our home pulsed with life and warmth. Gerald had kept me alive out of obligation, but I'd learned to truly live despite him. That knowledge settled into my bones like truth finally acknowledged. I was enough. I had always been enough. And the family I created proved it every single day. Years later, when people asked about my parents, I told them the simple truth: we weren't close. Most didn't pry further, respecting the boundary implicit in my tone. Those who knew the full story marveled at my resilience, but I never felt particularly resilient. I'd simply refused to accept someone else's limited vision of my worth. Refused to shrink myself to fit their narrow expectations. Refused to believe that biological connection automatically warranted love or loyalty. My revenge was living well. Building a life so full of genuine love and accomplishment that their rejection became irrelevant. Raising children who never questioned whether they deserved happiness. Creating a legacy of kindness and mutual respect that stood in stark contrast to the conditional affection I'd received. On New Year's Eve, almost 15 years after that devastating rejection, Nathan and I stood on our porch watching fireworks explode over the neighborhood. Ruby and Mason slept soundly upstairs, exhausted from the party we'd hosted for friends. Jasper dozed at our feet, old now but still devoted. Happy New Year, Nathan said, pulling me close as the clock struck midnight. Happy New Year, I replied, kissing him as explosions of color lit the sky. The years ahead would bring new challenges and joys. But standing there with Nathan, in the home we'd built and the life we'd chosen, I felt profound gratitude. My parents had tried to convince me I wasn't worthy of this happiness. I'd spent 15 years proving them spectacularly wrong.